There is a moment, most people have experienced it at least once, where you make a decision and somewhere in the quiet afterward, you already know it was the wrong one. Not because the outcome was bad, sometimes the outcome is fine, but because you felt it in the process. A small tug, a detail you moved past too quickly, a voice you talked yourself out of listening to. And later, when things unravel in exactly the way that tug was warning you about, you don't feel surprised. You feel something closer to recognition. That experience, that quiet retrospective accuracy, is not intuition in the mystical sense. It is something more specific and more learnable. There is a version of intelligence that does not show up on tests or resumes. It does not announce itself in conversations. It rarely gets rewarded in school, because school tends to measure recall and compliance, not the slower, more private work of actually thinking well. The people who carry this kind of intelligence are often labeled as hesitant or overly cautious or difficult. They take longer than others to commit. They revisit decisions other people have already forgotten. They notice inconsistencies in situations that seem, on the surface, completely resolved. What they are actually doing, though almost no one frames it this way, is developing their judgment. Judgment is not intelligence. It is not experience alone either, though experience feeds it. Judgment is the capacity to weigh information in the presence of uncertainty and arrive at a decision that holds up over time. It is the thing that separates people who are often right from people who are occasionally brilliant but chronically inconsistent. And the research on how judgment actually develops reveals something the self-improvement industry almost never talks about. It is not about thinking harder, it is about thinking differently. There are habits of mind, small structural shifts in how someone processes information that quietly reorganize the quality of every decision that follows. The first of these is something psychologists call decentering. It sounds abstract, but it is actually something you do in certain moments without realizing it. It is the ability to mentally step outside your own perspective, not to abandon it, but to hold it at a slight distance, the way you might hold a photograph to see it more clearly. Research from the University of Waterloo found that when people were prompted to reason about their own problems using the third person, referring to themselves by name as if observing someone else, their judgment improved measurably. Anxiety decreased. Reasoning became more accurate. The act of small psychological distance created room that close proximity had collapsed. The second habit is one that develops slowly, often through disappointment, the tolerance for not knowing. The human brain is a pattern completion machine. It does not hold ambiguity comfortably. When information is incomplete, the brain does not sit with the gap. It fills it instantly and automatically with something plausible. This is called the closure principle in cognitive psychology, and it is spectacularly useful in low-stakes situations and quietly catastrophic in high-stakes ones. People with strong judgment have learned, usually through having their assumptions publicly fail them, to notice the moment their brain starts completing a pattern and to pause there. Not to distrust their instincts, but to ask whether they are reading the situation or authoring it. Then there is the habit of thinking in time, not just asking what the right decision is now, but asking what the decision will look like from 3 years ahead. Psychologist Philip Tetlock spent decades studying why some people are dramatically better at predicting outcomes than others. What separated the best forecasters was not that they had better information. It was that they thought in time horizons, in probabilities, in ranges of possibility rather than certainties. They treated their predictions as hypotheses to be tested, not verdicts to be defended. Something adjacent to this is the practice of pre-mortem thinking, a term coined by cognitive psychologist Gary Klein. Before a decision is final, you imagine it has already failed. Not to catastrophize, but to ask, if this went wrong, what would the most likely reason be? This single inversion does something remarkable to the brain. It shifts the cognitive task from justifying a choice to evaluating it, and the two processes recruit different neural systems. Justification is emotional and fast. Evaluation is slower, more honest, and more accurate. There is also a habit that looks from the outside like stubbornness, but is actually something closer to epistemic patience. It is the refusal to update beliefs under social pressure alone. Good judgment requires what psychologist Jonathan Haidt would describe as the opposite of motivated reasoning, the willingness to change your mind because the evidence changed, not because the room got uncomfortable. This is genuinely difficult. Human beings are social animals, and the brain registers social disapproval the same way it registers physical threat. Holding a position in the face of that signal is effortful in a way that most people underestimate. Then there is calibration, the recognition that confidence and accuracy are not the same thing, and that the relationship between them is the thing to watch. Overconfident people are not simply arrogant, they are usually missing feedback loops. They make a decision, it works out, and they conclude they were right. What they are not asking is whether the decision worked because of their reasoning or despite it. Calibrated thinkers maintain a quiet internal log of their errors, not obsessively, not self-critically, just honestly. The last habit is perhaps the hardest to describe because it is less of a technique and more of a stance. It is the willingness to be changed by what you encounter, to read something or hear something or watch something unfold and let it actually alter how you see, rather than immediately sorting it into what you already believe. Psychologists call this cognitive flexibility, but that phrase doesn't quite capture the feeling of it. It's more like a particular kind of intellectual humility, not the performed kind, not the kind that says, I could be wrong while staying exactly where it started, but the genuine, slightly uncomfortable experience of something landing differently than you expected. None of these habits make a person infallible. They do not eliminate error. What they do, quietly and over time, is reduce the particular kind of error that comes from the mind deceiving itself, from filling gaps too quickly, updating too slowly, confusing confidence for accuracy, or defending a position long after the evidence has moved on. And the interesting thing is that most people who develop these habits don't think of themselves as careful thinkers. They think of themselves as people who got things wrong enough times that they started paying closer attention. The judgment was not something they built, it was something they grew into through failure, through patience, and through the gradual accumulation of noticing. If you recognized something of yourself in that, in the way the brain completes patterns, or in the discomfort of holding a position under social pressure, or in that retrospective accuracy that arrives too late, there is more to explore about why the mind works the way it does, and why, for certain kinds of people, understanding that is not just interesting, it's quietly necessary.